Everyone in the company knew about Clara Morgan, the powerful, rich, and proud CEO who ruled her billion-dollar business from the 72nd floor. She was smart, beautiful, and always one step ahead of everyone. But she was also known for something else. She loved chess, and she had never lost. Not to her managers, not to her rivals. Not even to a Grand Master who once challenged her during a charity event. Clara had a rule, a strange one, every month. She would invite someone from the office to play one game of chess. If they could beat her, she promised to grant them one wish, any wish. One man asked for a car, another asked for a big promotion. Once, a senior manager even asked, "If I win, will you marry me?" Clara had only laughed and said, "Beat me in chess, and I'll consider it." But no one ever won, not even close. That morning was like any other. The sun poured through the giant glass windows of Clara's office. She sat at her desk, sipping her black coffee, when a tall, quiet man walked in, holding a mop and a bucket. He wore a simple janitor's uniform. His name tag said Ethan. He didn't say much. Just started cleaning the marble floor near the window, but his eyes kept drifting toward the chessboard on Clara's table. She noticed and smiled. "Do you play chess, Ethan?" she asked casually. He paused, straightened up, and said softly, "I used to." Clara chuckled. "Used to?" "That's what they all say." He smiled faintly. It's been a while. There was something different about him. His eyes were calm, deep, like he was hiding a story. Clara, feeling bored and playful, pointed to the board. "Come on then, play a game with me." Ethan hesitated. "I'm just the janitor." Clara leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "Tell you what," she said with a teasing smile, "beat me in 3 moves, and I'll marry you." The room went silent. Ethan looked at her, surprised. Clara laughed. "What? Scared already?" He slowly walked over to the board and sat down. "No, just thinking," he replied calmly. A few staff members outside the office peeked in, curious. The CEO playing chess with the janitor. This was something new. Clara made the first move, confident. Relaxed, Ethan made his first move without hesitation. She smiled and made her next move. Then Ethan moved again, his fingers light and sure. The moment he touched the third piece, the entire board changed. Clara stared at the pieces. Her smile faded, her eyes widened. Checkmate, she blinked twice, then leaned forward. Studying the board again, it was real. She had lost, in just 3 moves. The room went cold. Ethan stood up slowly and picked up his mop. "Thank you for the game," he said politely. Clara's voice came out sharp. "Wait, how did you do that?" He looked at her, calm and quiet. "I've played before," he said, and turned to leave. Clara stood frozen. For the first time in years, someone had defeated her. Not just anyone, a janitor, but who was he, really? The rest of the day, she couldn't focus. She kept replaying the game in her head. Those 3 moves, they weren't luck, they were perfect. Later that night, Clara opened her laptop and typed in his name, Ethan West. What she found made her heart race. He wasn't just some janitor years ago. He had been a national chess champion, a boy genius known across the world. Then suddenly, he disappeared from the scene, vanished. No one knew why. Now, here he was, working quietly in her company, mopping floors, beating CEOs. Clara leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. Her ego was bruised. Yes, but her curiosity was burning. Who was this man who defeated her so easily? Why was he hiding behind a mop? And why did his eyes seem to carry so much pain? Clara didn't know it yet, but the real game had just begun. And this time, the prize wasn't a wish. It was something far more dangerous. Her heart. The next morning, Clara Morgan sat at her desk, her fingers tapping on the smooth wood table. She didn't touch her coffee, didn't check her emails. Her mind was still stuck on one thing: Ethan, the janitor who beat her in just 3 moves. It wasn't just a loss, it was a mystery. How could someone that quiet, that ordinary, hold so much skill? She had searched him online last night. His name appeared in old tournament records. Photos of a young boy holding trophies. Newspapers calling him the silent genius of chess. Then, suddenly, nothing. No new games, no interviews, no scandals. He simply disappeared. Now, he was cleaning offices. Why? Clara needed answers. She called her assistant. "Find Ethan West and bring him to my office." Now, 20 minutes later, Ethan stepped in, his mop still in hand. He looked the same: calm, focused, quiet. Clara waved him toward the chair. In front of her desk, "Sit, please," she said, her voice softer than usual. He sat, but didn't speak. She leaned forward. "You were a national champion, weren't you?" Ethan didn't react, just nodded once. "I saw your records," she added. "You were amazing." He finally looked at her. He said, "A long time ago, what happened?" She asked, "Why did you stop playing?" Ethan looked out the window, eyes distant. "There was a girl," he said slowly. "My little sister, Lily." Clara stayed quiet, sensing something deeper. "She was sick," Ethan continued. "I didn't know. I was too focused on tournaments, games, trophies. She came to one of my matches once, even though she had a fever. She wanted to see me win." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I won that day, the biggest game of my life. But she collapsed after the match. She didn't make it." Clara's heart sank. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Ethan nodded, eyes still on the skyline. "I blamed myself," he said. "Chess didn't matter anymore, so I quit. I wanted a life where no one expected anything from me. No more pressure, no more eyes watching every move, and you chose to become a janitor." Clara asked gently. He smiled a little. "It's quiet, honest work." "I like cleaning up other people's messes," he said, with a hint of dry humor. Clara didn't know what to say. She expected a secret genius, a hidden talent, but instead, she found a broken heart. Still, she couldn't stop herself. "Why did you play yesterday?" Ethan finally looked at her, and this time his eyes were sharp. "Because I wanted to see if I still could, and because I wanted to see your face when I won." Clara burst into a small laugh. "So it was revenge." He shook his head. "No, curiosity," he said, "and maybe a little fun." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them no longer tense, but thoughtful. Then Clara stood up and walked to the chessboard on her table. "Will you play with me again?" she asked, turning to him. Ethan stood slowly. "I don't play for money or promises," he said. "Not anymore." Clara nodded. "I don't want to offer you a deal this time, just a game. No tricks, no dares. I want to learn." Ethan looked surprised, but nodded. He moved to the board, and they began to play, outside the office window. The city moved fast, as always, but inside that room, time slowed. They played in silence, each move thoughtful, quiet, careful. Clara lost again, but this time, she didn't feel angry. She felt lighter. Ethan stood to leave, picking up his mop again. "I'll get back to work," he said, before he could step out. Clara called after him. "Ethan," he turned. "Would you ever consider coming back to the game?" she asked. "You're too good to hide." Ethan gave her a long look. "I'm not hiding," he said, "just healing." Then he left. Clara stood alone in her office, staring at the chessboard. The game was over, but the story had just begun, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the queen. She felt like the student, and maybe, just maybe, that was okay. The office buzzed with whispers the next day. Everyone had heard what happened. The CEO, Clara Morgan, had lost a chess match to the janitor in just 3 moves. Some thought it was a rumor. Others believed it completely. But either way, the story had already spread beyond the walls of the building. One intern secretly filmed the moment Ethan stood up and quietly walked out. The short video, just 30 seconds long, was uploaded to social media with the title, "CEO Promised to Marry Anyone Who Beat Her in Chess. The janitor did it in 3 moves." By the afternoon, it had over 2 million views. By night, it had gone viral across the internet. News channels began calling Clara's office. Influencers reacted to the clip, and comments exploded. Some laughed, some admired Ethan, and some wondered, who is this guy? Is this real? Will she really marry him? Clara sat in her office watching the video. She wasn't angry. She was surprised, and strangely, she couldn't stop smiling. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Ma'am?" "The press wants a statement." Clara waved her hand. "Let them wait." She opened her company's social media account and typed a message. Herself, "Yes. I was beaten in 3 moves. Yes. I did say I'd marry anyone who could do it, but I never said when." That single post got 1.5 million likes in 2 hours. The world was watching, and Clara had an idea the next morning. Clara walked down to the janitor's hallway herself. Ethan was cleaning the floor near the elevator. He looked up, surprised. "You came all the way down here?" he asked. She nodded. "You beat me once, remember?" "I don't like being embarrassed twice." He chuckled softly. Clara smiled and handed him a white envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "A formal invitation," she said, "to the annual charity event next weekend. I want a rematch, Ethan." Raised an eyebrow. "Another bet." She shook her head. "No bets, no marriage promises, just a public game." Ethan opened the envelope and saw a golden invitation card. It said, "VIP Chess Exhibition featuring Clara Morgan versus Ethan West." He stared at her. "You really want to do this in public?" Clara nodded. "People already know. Let's give them something real to watch." He thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, one more game." The night of the event came quickly. The ballroom of the Morgan Tower was filled with guests, reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. A grand chessboard was placed in the center of the stage, 2 chairs facing each other, one for the powerful CEO, the other for the humble janitor. Clara walked in wearing a deep red dress, elegant and graceful. Ethan wore a simple black suit borrowed from someone in the building. Still, he looked calm, steady, unshaken by the crowd. The announcer introduced them. "Ladies and gentlemen, the undefeated CEO versus the mystery man who ended her streak. Let the game begin." Clara made the first move. This time, she was careful. Focused, no jokes, no teasing. Ethan played slowly, giving her time, move after move. The crowd watched in total silence. 10 minutes passed, then 20. This was not like the first match. Clara had improved, she had learned, but Ethan's skill was still far above hers. He could win easily. He saw the checkmate pattern forming, only 3 moves away. But then, something strange happened. He looked up and saw her eyes full of effort, determination, and hope for a second. He paused, then he made the wrong move. Gasps filled the room as Clara took the advantage. Her pieces began to move faster. Cutting into his defense, the match became close, even exciting, and finally, she won, barely. The room erupted in applause. People cheered. Cameras flashed. Clara looked shocked but thrilled. She stood up and extended her hand. "Good game," she said, breathing hard. Ethan smiled as he shook her hand. "You've gotten better," he said. "You let me win, didn't you?" She whispered, leaning in close. He smiled, but didn't answer. Clara narrowed her eyes. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he said softly. "You needed a win more than I did." The crowd rushed in, reporters shouting questions. Are they dating? Will she marry him now? What's next for the janitor who became a hero? Clara turned toward the cameras and smiled. All I'll say is he's more than a janitor, and this game is not over yet. Backstage, as the noise faded, Clara and Ethan sat together quietly. She offered him a drink, and they clinked glasses. You just became the most famous janitor in the world, she teased, and you just became the first CEO to smile after losing, he replied. They both laughed. But something had changed between them. No longer strangers, no longer just a CEO and an employee. They had become something more. Not lovers yet. Not rivals anymore, but perhaps, for the first time, partners on the same board. The ballroom lights had faded. The crowd had gone home, but Clara Morgan couldn't sleep that night. She sat alone in her giant penthouse, city lights twinkling. Outside her glass walls, her red dress from the event was still lying on the couch. She had changed into soft pajamas, but her mind refused to rest. Her fingers tapped lightly on the glass chessboard sitting in her living room. Move after move played in her mind. Not just from the game, but from Ethan's face, his soft smile. And his final words, "You needed a win more than I did." Clara stared at the queen piece, her favorite, strong, fast, unpredictable, just like her. But for the first time in years, she wondered, had she really won, or had he given her a gift? She stood up and walked to the window. Below her, the city kept moving. No one knew the truth behind her smile, her confidence, her cold charm. No one knew that her success was built on pain. Loneliness was a familiar guest in her heart. When Clara was 12, her father had walked out. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to survive. Clara studied under streetlights, practiced chess in secret while classmates laughed at her. She rose through the world with nothing but her brain, her beauty, and her boldness. But to keep climbing, she built a wall of pride, control, and perfection. The queen never looked weak. The queen never cried. The queen never fell. Until a janitor checkmated her in 3 moves and made her feel human again the next morning. Clara walked into the office early. She ignored the cameras outside, the reporters waiting for quotes. She went straight to the basement where Ethan was usually found. He was already working, fixing a broken water pipe. Clara watched him from a distance. He moved with quiet confidence. Sleeves rolled up, hands wet, but focused. He didn't look like a janitor anymore. He looked like a man who knew exactly who he was. When he finally noticed her, he stood and wiped his hands. "You came all the way down here again?" he asked. "I was curious," she said, "to see if you'd wear a crown today." He smiled. "I left it in my locker." She laughed softly, then held up a brown folder. "I want to offer you something," she said. Ethan looked at the folder, but didn't take it. "What is it?" "A job," she said. "Not as a janitor." She placed the folder on a table. "A strategic advisor role," she explained. "You're smart.com. And think 5 steps ahead, like a grand master. You could help run this company?" Ethan looked surprised. "You trust me with that?" "I lost to you," she replied, "twice." That's more than most board members can say. He picked up the folder but didn't open it. "I didn't come here to climb ladders," he said quietly. "I came here to be invisible." Clara's voice softened. "You were invisible for too long. It's time the world saw you." Ethan looked away, unsure. She stepped closer. "I don't want to own you, Ethan. I just want you to stand beside me. I've spent years being alone at the top." He finally looked her in the eyes. "And now? Now, I don't want to be alone anymore," she admitted. Silence passed between them. Not awkward, just honest. Ethan didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Instead, he walked past her and gently said, "I'll think about it later." That day, Clara did something she hadn't done in years. She went to the rooftop garden her mother once built before passing away. There she found her old chess, set dusty but untouched. She sat at the table and began playing alone. But it didn't feel the same anymore. She missed the quiet competition, the challenge, the unexpected moves. She missed him that evening. A security guard came to her office. "Ma'am, there's a package for you." She took it and opened. The box inside was a small wooden chess piece, a pawn, and a note. Even pawns reach the end of the board. Then they become something greater. "Ethan," Clara smiled, tears touching her eyes. No man had ever seen through her walls. No man had ever made her feel strong and soft at the same time. And now, she wasn't sure if she was still playing a game or if her heart had already surrendered. Clara Morgan stood in front of her office mirror, brushing her hair back with steady hands, but inside, her heart was not steady at all. Since the night of the chess rematch, since Ethan gave her the wooden pawn with that quiet note, something had shifted, not just in her thoughts, but in her feelings. For the first time in years, Clara wasn't thinking about stock prices or board meetings. She was thinking about him, not the janitor, not the chess prodigy, just Ethan that morning. She didn't take the private elevator. Instead, she walked through the staff hallways, her heels echoing on the tiles. Her assistant looked confused, but didn't stop her. Clara entered the employee lounge quietly, and there he was, sitting at a table, reading a book. He didn't notice her at first, but when he looked up, his eyes widened just slightly. He closed the book with a soft thump. "Did I miss another meeting?" "No," Clara smiled. "You missed breakfast?" He raised an eyebrow. Clara held up a paper bag. "I brought two." She sat across from him, offering him one bag. Inside were 2 warm croissants and a small bottle of orange juice. Simple, but thoughtful. Ethan looked surprised but took it. "Thank you," he said softly. They ate in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that felt natural, not awkward. Finally, Clara asked, "Do you ever visit the rooftop garden?" Ethan shook his head. "Didn't know we had one. I'd like to show you," she said, standing up. He followed without a word. The rooftop garden was hidden from most of the staff. It had old benches, flowering vines, and a view that made the whole city look like a painting. In the middle sat the stone chess table Clara used to play on as a teenager when her mother was still alive. They would sit here for hours. Now, only memories remained till today. Clara sat down and gestured to the seat across from her. Ethan sat looking around. "This place feels like it's part of another world." "It was," Clara said, "before the meetings, before the pressure. My mom planted the flowers. They sat together, watching the sunlight warm the garden. Walls, the silence between them deepened not with distance, but with unspoken understanding. Ethan finally asked, "Why me?" Clara looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "Why bring me here? Talk to me. Offer me a job," he said. "Why not forget it happened and move on like most CEOs would?" She took a deep breath. "Because I'm tired of being alone," she said. "And because I admire you." His eyes searched hers, unsure if she was serious. "You admire a janitor," he said with a half smile. "I admire a man who stayed kind." Clara replied, "Who carries pain with grace and intelligence without pride." Ethan looked down at the chessboard between them. He picked up the queen piece and spun it slowly. In his fingers, "I used to think love was just another distraction," he said, "something that made you weak. What do you think now?" she asked softly. He looked up at her. "I think love is like chess," he said. "You don't win by rushing, you win by understanding every move." Clara smiled, her chest tightening at his words. "Then maybe we're playing the same game now," she whispered. He reached across the board and gently touched her hand. Her heart skipped, but she didn't pull away. Just then, a strong breeze blew through the garden, lifting Clara's hair and scattering petals from the vines. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was still looking at her. But this time, there was something Different in his gaze, not just respect or kindness. Something warmer. Before he could speak, her phone buzzed and emergency board call. She looked down, sighed, and stood up. "I have to go," she said. Ethan stood too. "Back to your throne." She laughed. "Something like that. But I'd rather be here," she added, before walking away. As she reached the elevator, she turned back. Ethan was still standing there, watching her leave. He didn't smile, but his eyes said everything. That night, Clara lay in bed, phone in hand, staring at the wooden pawn he gave her. It now sat beside her lamp, a reminder of something real, something simple. And for the first time in her life, the Queen didn't feel lonely. She felt like she had someone to protect, and maybe someone who could protect Hera. A few days had passed since the rooftop garden moment, but the memory of that shared silence, of Ethan's fingers brushing Clara's hand, still lived in her mind like a soft echo. Clara Morgan had faced world leaders, billionaires, and boardroom monsters, yet none of them ever made her heart race like a quiet janitor with tired eyes and a kind soul. She wasn't used to this, not knowing what someone else was thinking. Not being in control. At the office, she found herself looking for him in every hallway, listening for his calm footsteps, his slow voice. Even the scent of fresh floor polish made her strangely hopeful. She hated how much she missed him, and yet she didn't want it to stop. On Friday evening, Clara stayed later than usual. The building was mostly empty, the lights dim. She stood by the tall window in her office, holding a glass of cold water, staring at the glowing skyline behind her. A quiet knock echoed. She turned, and there he was. Ethan stood in the doorway, holding a small paper bag. "I figured you'd still be here," he said. "I brought coffee. Not from the machine downstairs, this one's the good kind." Clara smiled, her shoulders relaxing. "You came at the perfect time," she said, inviting him in. He handed her the coffee and leaned against the desk. "I thought about your offer," he said. "The job?" Clara sipped slowly, heart thumping, and "I'll accept," Ethan said, "but I want to set the terms." Clara raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh?" "A janitor negotiating with a CEO." Ethan grinned. "Only fair." Clara folded her arms. "All right, I'm listening." He stepped closer, serious now. "I'll join as your advisor," he said, "but no fame. No press, no photos. I work behind the scenes only." Clara nodded slowly. "Done. And one more thing." He added, "I don't play games. Any more, not business games, not love games." Her breath caught slightly at the word love, but she kept her voice calm. "And what if I'm tired of playing too?" she asked gently. He looked at her for a long time. Then he walked closer, stopping just in front of her. His voice dropped, soft and sincere. "Then let's make a deal." Clara blinked. "A deal?" Ethan nodded. "No titles between us. No power games. When we talk like equals, not a queen and a pawn." She felt something warm stir in her chest. She nodded. "Deal." They stood in silence, only inches apart. The city glowed outside, but inside the office, time slowed again. Clara whispered, "You know, I think I'm afraid." Ethan tilted his head. "Of what?" "Of caring," she said. "Of letting someone in and not knowing how it ends." He smiled gently. "That's the best part," he said. "You don't have to know the end to start something real." Their hands brushed, neither of them pulled away, but just before the moment could turn into something more. Clara's desk phone rang loudly. She sighed and turned away. The screen showed the name Harold Lynn, the company's second in command. Ethan watched her pick up the phone, her expression changing. She listened quietly, then said, "Understood. I'll be right there." She put the phone down and looked at Ethan. "There's a problem," she said, voice sharp now. "One of our board members leaked sensitive info to a competitor." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Who?" "Harold," she said. I trusted him for 5 years. Ethan's face hardened. You'll need a strategy fast, he said, stepping into his new role instantly. I'll help, but remember our deal. Clara nodded, her CEO armor slipping back into place, but her eyes still held something softer now. Something only Ethan could see. Together, they moved to the conference room. No longer just a CEO and a janitor. Now, they were a team. Later that night, after the damage control meeting was done, Clara sat alone again in her office, but she wasn't tired. She was burning with something stronger than anger. Stronger than fear. She walked to her chessboard and pulled out the queen and pawn pieces. She set them on the center square, facing each other, and smiled because she knew the strongest moves were made not in silence, but in partnership. The boardroom was filled with tension. 12 people sat around the long black table. But no one spoke. Only the hum of the lights and the sound of pages flipping filled the room. Clara Morgan stood at the head of the table, her face calm, but her eyes sharp like blades. Beside her stood Ethan, no longer in janitor clothes, but in a simple dark suit. He looked like he had always belonged there. Not because of his appearance, but because of his presence. Harold Lynn, the man who betrayed Clara by leaking documents to a rival company, sat with a fake smile on his face. He tapped his pen slowly, confident he thought he had the upper hand. After all, he had the board on his side, and he believed Clara was too proud to fight dirty. But Harold didn't know what Clara had now. She had Ethan. Clara opened a folder in front of her and handed out printed pages. "Before we begin," she said, her voice smooth, "you all should read this." The board members glanced at the documents. Slowly, frowns appeared on their faces. Harold's hands stopped moving. "These are internal messages," Clara continued. "Proof that Harold planned to push me out by creating a fake scandal. And here," she pointed to another page, "is the signature of the company he was secretly selling our patents to. How did you get these?" One board member asked, surprised. Ethan stepped forward calmly, by thinking 5 moves ahead. He said, and by listening to what wasn't being said. Clara crossed her arms. "You underestimated us. Harold, I may be the queen on the board, but even a pawn can end the game." Harold stood up quickly. "This is illegal. You've invaded my privacy." "No," Clara interrupted. "You used a company device for personal gain that makes it company property." The board went quiet. One by one, they looked at each other, then at Clara. Finally, the oldest board member cleared his throat. "I move that we vote to remove Harold Lynn permanently from this company." The vote passed, 12 hands up, none against. Harold was finished. Security entered the room moments later to escort him out as he walked past Ethan. He paused. "You did this?" he hissed. Ethan replied calmly, "No, you did it to yourself." Later that evening, Clara and Ethan stood alone in the same room. The boardroom felt bigger now, quieter. Clara turned to him, her eyes softer than before. "Osh, you saved my company," she said. "I owe you everything." Ethan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I told you, I don't play for power or praise." "Then what do you play for?" she asked quietly. He stepped closer, looking at her with steady eyes. "For peace," he said. "For connection, for something real." Clara's heart beat faster. She looked down at the chess pin on his jacket. Just a small silver queen he had started wearing after the rooftop game. "You know," she whispered, "I never wanted to fall for someone like you." Ethan smiled gently. "But you did." She nodded slowly. "And I don't want to run from it anymore." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out something, a tiny carved king chess piece. He placed it gently into her hand. She looked down at it, surprised. "You kept this?" "I carved it myself," he said. "It's not perfect, but it belongs next to your queen." Clara blinked, her voice soft and emotional. "You're not just a strategist, Ethan," she said. You're the first man who ever saw the woman behind the title. He smiled. And you're the only woman who made me want to pick up a chess piece again, outside. The city lights flickered like stars, but inside, everything was still, warm, and quiet. Clara stepped forward and took his hand. You once said checkmate. Is the end of the game? She whispered. But maybe it's not the end. Maybe, Ethan replied. It's just the beginning. Months passed. Ethan became Clara's most trusted advisor, not just in business, but in life. Together, they built more than just profits. They built trust, respect, and something no one expected: love. The media still talked about the day the janitor beat the CEO in 3 moves. But now they added something new to the story. He took her heart in just one. At their small wedding held in the rooftop garden, Clara placed a pawn and a queen together on the cake and whispered to Ethan, "You didn't just checkmate me, you rescued me." He smiled and replied, "I just made my best move."